America is a very strange country. Now, you could argue that all countries are strange in their own way, and you wouldn't be wrong. Every place is unique, they have their own idiosyncrasies and eccentricities about them, but as I've traveled to more and more countries and seen more of what this world has to offer, I've come to realize that America is truly an anomaly in more ways than I previously imagined. And as you'll see in this video, I am not the only one who has come to this conclusion, because in this video, I will be reacting to fellow Americans experiencing reverse culture shock after coming back to the USA. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this first video.
These are my reverse culture shocks. I live in Chile, I'm from the US, I'm visiting. Every time I come back, I have a new culture shock. There's just nothing like being in the airport and seeing your first Karen and be like, honey, I'm home. Shout out to the Karens. On my flight, there was a flight attendant singing.
So right there, right off rip, Karen culture, that is a real thing. Karen culture is basically a symptom of American entitlement. And anyone who's come across a lot of Americans understand that American entitlement is not just a fallacy, it's not just a myth, it is actually real. In fact, when I look back at some of my first videos from my own travels overseas for the first time, I see the entitlement within myself. For example, going to Spain and expecting them to speak English. Now, maybe that was kind of a fair assumption to make, given that the Netherlands and many other European countries actually speak proficient English as well, but that is the exception rather than the rule, as I've come to realize being in Thailand, visiting Japan very briefly, so on and so forth. American entitlement is very real. And what I've realized is that a lot of times companies cater to that entitlement. The customer is always right. That culture does not exist anywhere else I've been thus far. Literally doesn't exist, especially in Europe. They are not having that shit at all. If you have an issue and you start acting a fool in the store, you start trying to press the employees, they will get you out of there expeditiously. So that's one thing that I won't say it's exclusive to America, but it's definitely a very American thing.
And everyone was just like so unbothered. I forgot that people in the US just don't give a fuck about most things. They're like, oh, flight attendant singing, whatever. People not wearing shoes in a hotel, whatever. Like, the Ozempic ads are everywhere. Radio, TV, you cannot get away from them because the US is one of the only countries in the world to allow pharmaceutical advertising.
That right there is a big one as well. And it just goes to show that, of course, the pharmaceutical and the medical industries in the US are primarily for profit. They are not concerned about caring for people unless it brings them more profit. To me, that's criminal. It is criminal that they are allowed to advertise pharmaceutical drugs, because more often than not, if somebody is taking a pharmaceutical drug, if they've been prescribed a pharmaceutical drug, it means that they need it, and a doctor has informed them that they need it. So what's the point of advertising it? Advertisement shouldn't be necessary, because either they need it and their doctor has told them, or they don't need it, and there's no reason for them to even know about it. Again, for profit. It's no wonder why America is struggling with a substance abuse issue at a very mass level. This opioid crisis, whatever you want to call it, that's a real thing. It's not a coincidence.
So, I think that's kind of weird. I think that should be a decision between you and your doctor. Anyway, I also got extremely humbled because I tried to order an Aperol Spritz at a dive bar. That was my bad, but they did have Aperol on the bar. But they didn't have champagne and Prosecco. And she's like, do you want to want something else? No. But anyway, that's my fault. Also, I always forget Americans are so loud. We have no concept of an indoor voice. People are just so loud at all the time.
Something that I recently read really fascinated me. And basically the person was saying that in the US, people kind of have it backwards in a sense. Where in the US, they always talk about using your indoor voice indoors, but then outdoors or away from home, you can be as loud as you want. Whereas in most other places, it's the exact opposite. At home, you can be loud and obnoxious or whatever you want to do because it's your home and you're not affecting other people, provided that you don't have very close neighbors, in which case you should still keep your volume level down. Whereas when you're out in public, you should try to kind of keep things toned down. And it really shows when you go to these city centers and these plazas, these squares in European cities, and you realize that, wow, you can still hear your own thoughts. Even though there are many other people there, it's so quiet relative to the amount of people there that you still feel at ease and at peace. And as an introvert who already doesn't like being around a whole lot of people more often than not, that is an absolute godsend. It gives you all the benefits of having that pedestrian ambiance and that density and the culture that that brings without all of the drawbacks that you would get in a place like, let's say, Times Square in New York City.
And also, I've noticed that protein is in everything. Like, so many protein shakes, added protein to chips, popcorn. Like, can we just chill on the protein? Like, I think we're okay unless you're trying to be a bodybuilder.
Yeah, so that right there, honestly, in the Netherlands, I felt like they had a lot of protein products as well. And that was actually one of my favorite things, was that you had the protein products. In fact, for vegans like myself, there were more protein products and they were cheaper. That's something that I really miss about the Netherlands, is that they had cheap vegan protein options. That is something that in pretty much every other country I visited, I just haven't been able to find to that same magnitude. And rest assured that as soon as I get off the plane in the Netherlands, the next time I go, I am going straight to Albert Heijn. I don't care how tired I am. I'm taking all my luggage. I'm going to Albert Heijn. I'm going straight to that protein section and I am tapping in and cashing out. On to the next video.
Reverse culture shocks I've experienced as an American who lived in Europe for 4.5 years and recently moved back to the United States. The first one is taxes on everything you buy. So in Europe, the taxes are always included in the price. So when something says $9.99, it's literally $9.99.
I'm not gonna lie, they got my girlfriend with that a few times when we were in the US, where she just forgot that you don't have the full price on the label. And this is one of those things that, again, growing up in the US, you just think it's normal. You don't realize that other countries don't operate like that. But once you realize that other countries don't operate like that and you experience what it's like to see the price and be able to pull your calculator out and add it all up without having to account for some undisclosed sales tax rate, which oftentimes they don't even put the sales tax rate on the label. At the very least, if you're gonna put the pre-tax price, put the sales tax rate on the label as well so you can calculate it. But I digress. Once you realize what it's like to not have to add that in, and you get to the counter and you already have your money ready because you know exactly how much it's going to cost and you don't have to put anything back because you know you can afford it, and then you go back to the US and you experience the thievery for all intents and purposes that they're engaging in these big box stores, you realize that America is a country that is fundamentally flawed. The fact that practices like this are not only tolerated, but accepted and even defended. Insane to me.
And here in America, if it says $9.99, it's $9.99. You go to the register and then they put in the tax. So it's never the price that you see on the sticker or on the tag at the grocery store. It's always more. Nothing includes taxes here. Everything is pre-tax, and then you add the tax when you check out. So I know a lot of Europeans complain about this, and I just had that reverse culture shock as well. The driving. I know everyone talks about this. I specifically live in the suburbs of Atlanta, so walking to the grocery store or the supermarket is not common.
Yeah, in Atlanta, in Dallas, in Los Angeles, in pretty much any major metropolitan region that is in the southern half of the US, walkability is a complete afterthought. It's not even an afterthought. They just don't even consider it at all because people don't do it. But people don't do it because they don't have a means to do it. because the cities aren't designed that way. And because nobody's doing it, they have no incentive to provide the infrastructure. So it's this chicken and egg effect. And Not Just Bikes talks a lot about induced demand. And in my opinion, that is the best solution. But rest assured that especially in those conservative states like Georgia, where she is, and Texas, where I'm from, let alone Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, places like that, that's not going to go over very well. You're going to have protests, people talking about these socialist policies and whatever other bullshit they like to say.
I feel like if you walk where I live, people will stop and ask you, like, are you okay? Like, why are you walking? One, it's not really close by where I've lived and where I live now. And two, you can't really walk there. It's not a walkable place. And another thing is that the service here is very fast. And coming from Greece, it's quite shocking and a big reverse culture shock. So when you go get dinner or lunch, the waiter or the waitress comes quickly to your table, asks what you want to drink, gets your order, and done. And there's pros and cons to that.
So that right there, I used to work at a restaurant. In fact, my first job was at IHOP. Basically, the reason why they are so urgent in getting to your table and why they keep coming back to your table to kind of harass you under the pretense of servicing you is because they have these things called turn times. And they calculate how long each guest or group of guests is at each table. And ideally, as a waiter or waitress, you want to have the lowest turn time possible so you can make the most amount of money because you're getting paid not by the hour, but by the amount of tables you get because you're relying on tips. So this is a direct consequence of restaurant owners not wanting to pay their workers a livable wage.
In Europe, it's more of a social gathering when you go out to lunch or to dinner. It's you want to stay there a few hours. Here, they get you in and out, and that's because the waiters and the waitresses are making money off of tips, unlike in Europe where they're on an hourly wage.
Exactly, and I love that she brought up the social gathering component of it, and that really just serves as another symptom of the American hustle culture, at least the lack of that social gathering aspect, that is people just don't spend as much time at these places, or they operate with a lot more intention rather than ease and peace. It's not just about hanging out and enjoying your evening, it's another thing on their to-do list. And personally, that is something that I do not miss about being in the US, is that hustle mentality, constantly on the move, rat race energy that permeates every single aspect of life. On to the next video. And with this one right here, just a quick disclaimer, I have it muted because she has copyrighted music in the video and my girlfriend needs food. Single-use paper and plastic plates at any time. This right here, come to think of it, yeah, that's not very common. That's not very common in Europe, and I haven't really seen that here in Asia either. I think that might be kind of a uniquely American thing because in the US, they don't care about taking care of the environment. Goosebumps from air conditioning. I probably have some goosebumps on my arm right now because I have the AC on full blast. I keep this AC on in the apartment because I don't want the camera to overheat or anything like that. But that definitely took some getting used to when I went back to the US, especially coming from the Netherlands. That was a big reverse culture shock for me. Walking anywhere is futile and people will stare at you. This is a common scene right here. Hold on real quick. This is what a lot of America looks like. Forget about Times Square, forget about the Hollywood sign and whatever else you think of when you think of the US, the White House. This is what the majority of America actually looks like. And that's if you're lucky enough to have a sidewalk, especially one this wide. People do not walk. They just don't. Losing my child immediately in Walmart. Walmart is so big. Walmart is huge. They have kind of a Walmart equivalent here in Thailand. It's called Big C. But I think Big C is still smaller than Walmart. At Walmart, you can literally get clothes, you can get groceries, you can get your tire changed, you can get car parts, you can get a TV. It's literally all of these stores in one, which I'm pretty sure, and I might be mistaken in saying this, but just from what I've heard, is actually not the best for the economy, because if you think about each of those segments that I just mentioned, in most other countries, each segment will be its own store with its own managerial team and its own staff, so on and so forth. So in a sense, you could argue that having more Walmarts, Targets, these big box grocery stores is actually taking away jobs rather than adding them. Oh my gosh. That's something right there. That is for sure uniquely American. That's for sure uniquely American. Out of all the countries I've been to, I've never seen a place that has a cereal section that looks like this. I mean, honestly, what's the point? Why do you need that many boxes of Cheerios? I know Cheerios are a popular cereal, even in Europe, I'm pretty sure. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. But you're not selling that many units of Cheerios per day. You're just not. So what's the point? But yeah, this is insane. If you're somebody who struggles with decision making, if you're an indecisive person, American grocery stores are an absolute nightmare. And it's so pointless because more often than not, people stick to what they like. So if you know that you like Cheerios and, I don't know, Raisin Bran or Corn Flakes, then you're just going to stick with those cereals. All of this other stuff is irrelevant. So it's just taking up all of this extra space for no reason. And you know what? I think I've mentioned this in a few videos recently, but I've been reading this book about the 80-20 rule, and that's a rule that I abide by in my own life. And I feel like a lot of American businesses, what they fail to understand is that literally only a fifth of these products are going to net them 80% of their profit. And if the percentages aren't exact, they will be very close to that distribution. So really, they'd be much better off just getting rid of the other 80% and then having smaller buildings, which will lower the overhead, and they'd probably make a much better profit that way. Because again, you're still making 80% of the profit, but you're probably cutting the overhead back by about 50%. Explaining the stomach medication aisle to my kids. That is actually insane. Having that many different types of medications for stomach issues. Personally, I don't even take stuff like this. I don't take any over-the-counter medication. If I have a stomach ache, I just chew peppermint gum or drink ginger ale. If I have a headache, I go to sleep or drink water. But this is just insane. Wait. Forgetting not everywhere takes mobile pay, taking my cart away. Wait. They took her cart away? That's crazy. You know what? That's something that shocked me about Europe as well, was that they seem to be very far ahead in terms of the payment systems. Actually, here in Thailand as well, mobile pay is very common. It's commonly accepted. I don't think I ever used mobile pay until I left the US. That's not to say that nowhere in the US accepts it, but I never used it. I always used the card. And in some places, they even still use checks. Obviously, checks aren't required, but I remember when I had that job at IHOP that I mentioned earlier, this was 2016, 2017, they paid me with a physical check. I would show up every other Thursday and go collect my physical check, and I would cash it via my banking app. But that would suck. Imagine going through Walmart, going through those big cereal section aisles. You just got some medication for your kids because their stomachs are hurting or whatever, and you can't even actually check out any of it because they don't take mobile pay. Losing the car in the parking lot, that's a very American thing right there. That has happened to me many more times than I would like to admit. Those parking lots are insanely large. Not 100% sure if I can turn right at a red light. Yeah, that right there, that will get you caught up. And honestly, now that I've seen how traffic patterns operate in places like the Netherlands, where the traffic fatality rate is much lower than the US, I don't really see a good reason to have turn right on red. I just don't see the reason for that, because I suspect that most accidents actually occur because of that right there. And as far as the free unlimited condiments, people definitely abuse that. People for sure abuse that. But I didn't know they charge for condiments in Europe. I don't really get condiments whenever I get my food. I don't really do ketchup or mustard or whatever else people have. I just like my stuff plain personally. But that's pretty interesting that in the US they just allow you to take as much as you want, because what's to stop somebody from taking this whole entire thing? Absolutely nothing.